I'm Jessica Winters, 32, and until last Christmas, I thought my family was unbreakable. Then my phone lit up with Dad's voicemail. Christmas is off. Expect a call from my lawyer. 6 years earlier, I'd co-signed their $380,000 mortgage when they couldn't qualify a loan. That night, I didn't argue or plead, just texted understood and quietly removed my name from their loan. What followed was 48 hours of silence, then a tornado, 68 missed calls, panicked texts, and their lawyer practically begging for answers. Family drama during the holidays hits differently, so grab your hot chocolate and let me know in the comments if you've ever had a Christmas disaster that changed everything. If you're new here, I'd love to know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to join our community of survivors and thrivers. Growing up in Mapleton, a picturesque suburban neighborhood just outside of Portland, I was the daughter who could do no wrong in my father's eyes. Dad, Robert Winters, was a commercial real estate agent with a booming laugh that could fill our two-story colonial home. Mom, Linda, worked part-time as a dental hygienist and spent the rest of her time volunteering at church or hosting neighborhood gatherings. We were that picture-perfect American family that decorated our house with more Christmas lights than anyone else on the block and had matching pajamas for Christmas morning photos. Dad would wake us up at dawn with his special eggnog recipe, and Mom would already have cinnamon rolls baking in the oven. My younger brother Michael and I would race downstairs knowing that Dad had spent hours arranging presents under the tree to create what he called the perfect Christmas tableau. Every December, we'd drive around looking at lights while singing carols at the top of our lungs, stopping for hot chocolate at Gregory's Diner where the waitresses knew us by name. Those memories feel like they belong to a different lifetime now. Warm, golden, untainted by the reality that would eventually surface. The shift in our relationship was so gradual that I barely noticed it happening. After college, when I landed, my first marketing job in Chicago, Dad proudly told everyone his daughter was making it big in the city. I wasn't, not really. I was sharing a tiny apartment with 2 roommates and eating ramen more often than not. But I was independent and building something for myself. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, Dad's real estate business suffered badly. Properties weren't selling, commissions dried up, and suddenly, the parents who had always seemed financially secure were calling me with temporary money problems. At first, it was small things, helping with Michael's college textbooks, covering Mom's car repair. I never hesitated because they had given me everything growing up. By the time I turned 26, I had moved back closer to home and was climbing the corporate ladder at a digital marketing firm. That's when their mortgage troubles began. They had refinanced at the worst possible time, and their adjustable rate had skyrocketed. I still remember Dad's voice breaking when he called to tell me they might lose the family home. "Just a rough patch, Jesse," he assured me, but the fear in his voice was unmistakable. Without a second thought, I agreed to co-sign their new mortgage for $380,000. My credit was excellent, I had a stable job, and the loan officer assured me it was just a formality. My parents would make all the payments. "You're saving our home, sweetheart," Mom had whispered, hugging me tightly in the bank parking lot after signing the papers. For a while, everything seemed fine. I bought my own condo, advanced in my career, and started building my savings again. But subtle shifts in our dynamic emerged. When I couldn't make it home for my cousin's wedding because of a work commitment, Dad made pointed comments about forgetting where you came from. When I started dating Ryan, who worked as a high school history teacher, Mom repeatedly asked if I was settling because you could do so much better with your potential. My brother Michael, who had dropped out of college and moved back home, always backed our parents in every disagreement. "That's just how they are," became his mantra, whenever I expressed frustration at their intrusion into my life choices. The entitlement crept in so slowly I barely recognized it. Dad calling to borrow money for a golf club membership because I deserve something nice after all these years of hard work. Or Mom casually mentioning they were remodeling their kitchen, and since you're on the mortgage anyway, we just added a little to the home equity line. Each time I expressed concern, they'd remind me of all they'd sacrificed for me growing up. I started noticing a pattern. Their financial emergencies often coincided with my bonuses or promotions, which they somehow always knew about before I told them. The tightness in my chest when my phone displayed home calling became a physical warning sign I ignored for too long. By my 30th birthday, I had loaned them over $45,000 that was never repaid, co-signed their mortgage, and was listed as a guarantor on 3 of their credit cards. Yet somehow, whenever I achieved something, a promotion, my condo renovation, or my relationship with Ryan becoming serious, they found ways to minimize it or shift the conversation back to their needs. I was their successful daughter when they introduced me to friends, but in private, I was increasingly feeling like an ATM with emotional collateral. Last December marked my 3rd year with Ryan, and we'd recently moved into a beautiful craftsman-style house just 30 minutes from my parents. After years of cramped apartment Christmases or celebrating at my parents' house where I was still treated like a guest rather than family, I was thrilled to host the holidays in our new home. I spent weeks planning every detail, ordering a 9-foot Douglas fir, collecting family recipes, and hand-making personalized stockings for everyone, including Michael's new girlfriend Amber, whom I'd never met. Ryan teased me about my color-coded shopping lists and the spreadsheet tracking each gift purchase. But he supported my excitement, helping me string lights along our porch railing and assemble the new dining table that would finally fit the whole family. "This Christmas is going to be perfect," I told Ryan as we placed the angel atop our tree. "Everyone together in our home. It feels like a fresh start." Ryan had squeezed my hand but said nothing, his silence communicating what I wasn't ready to hear. The first red flag appeared 3 weeks before Christmas when I called Mom to confirm their arrival time. "Oh, honey, Dad and I might be a little late on Christmas Eve. We have to stop by the travel agency to finalize some details," she mentioned casually. "Travel agency? Are you planning a trip?" I asked, arranging pine cones in a bowl for the coffee table centerpiece. "Just a little Caribbean cruise for February," she replied. 35 years of marriage deserves a celebration, don't you think? I agreed, of course, but something didn't add up. Just 2 months earlier, they had called asking if I could help with their property tax payment because they were a little short this quarter. After hanging up, I searched for the cruise line Mom had mentioned and discovered their basic package started at $3,200 per person, not including excursions, drinks, or flights to the departure port. My stomach tightened with a familiar feeling. The next day, I drove to my parents' house, planning to casually discuss the cruise. When I arrived, a brand new 65-inch smart TV was being installed in their living room. Dad proudly showed off its features, mentioning it was an early Christmas gift to ourselves. In their kitchen, shopping bags from high-end department stores lined the counters. "Just a few things for the cruise," Mom explained, showing me designer sundresses with price tags still attached. I took a deep breath and tried to approach the subject gently. "The cruise sounds amazing, but I'm a little confused. Weren't you having trouble with the property tax payment recently?" Mom waved dismissively. "Oh, that was nothing. Just a temporary cash flow issue. You worry too much, Jessica." Dad patted my shoulder. "We've got everything under control. In fact, we're thinking about remodeling the master bath next spring. The cruise is our reward for being so disciplined with our finances." I couldn't hold back anymore. "Dad, if you can afford all this, why did you need my help with the taxes? And last summer with the roof repair? And my name is still on your mortgage." Dad's expression hardened. "Are you keeping score? After everything we've done for you? We raised you, put you through college, supported your career moves. Now that? We want to enjoy our lives a little. You're counting dollars and cents." Mom joined in, her voice taking on the wounded tone I'd heard increasingly over the years. "I didn't realize our spending needed your approval, Jessica. We're still your parents, not children you need to monitor." I tried explaining that I wasn't monitoring them. I was concerned about the pattern and my own financial exposure with my name on their loans. But the conversation quickly deteriorated, with Mom tearing up and Dad accusing me of being cold and calculating like those corporate types you work with. When I left, nothing was resolved. That evening, Ryan found me staring at our Christmas tree, the lights blurring through my tears. After I explained what happened, he said gently, "Jess, I've watched this cycle repeat for the 3 years we've been together. They claim hardship, you help, then discover they're spending lavishly. It's not sustainable, and it's not fair to you." Deep down, I knew he was right, but acknowledging the truth about my parents felt like a betrayal. The next week, Michael called. "Mom's really upset about your visit," he began without preamble. Why are you giving them grief about the cruise? They work hard and deserve some enjoyment. I tried explaining my perspective, but Michael cut me off. Let it go, Jess. Not everything needs to be analyzed to death. They're not getting any younger. Just let them enjoy their lives without the guilt trip. When I mentioned my financial concerns, he scoffed. You make plenty of money. It's not like you're struggling. Before hanging up, he added, just don't ruin Christmas with this attitude, okay? It's the one time of year we're all together. 2 days later, Dad called with news that they'd decided to get new carpeting installed before the holidays, to make the house nice for when you all visit after Christmas dinner at your place. When I reminded him that we had planned for everyone to stay at our house Christmas Eve and day, he said dismissively, well, your mother wants to wake up in her own bed on Christmas morning. We'll just come for dinner. All my careful planning, the guest room preparations, the Christmas morning brunch menu, the stockings waiting to be filled, suddenly seemed pointless. When I expressed disappointment, Dad's voice turned cold. I think you've forgotten something important, Jessica. We're still the parents in this relationship. If you push this mortgage business or try to control our spending again, there will be consequences. This attitude of yours needs to stop before you damage this family permanently. December 23rd began like any other day. I woke early, made coffee, and reviewed my final Christmas preparations while Ryan slept in. The house smelled of pine and cinnamon, and despite the tension with my parents, I felt a quiet satisfaction, looking at our beautifully decorated home. Everything was ready for the perfect Christmas, even if it wouldn't unfold exactly as I'd planned. The notification for a new voicemail came as I was wrapping Ryan's final gift. Seeing Dad on the caller ID, I assumed he was calling with another change to the Christmas plans. I pressed play and put the phone on speaker while continuing to fold the wrapping paper corners. His voice stopped me cold. Jessica, this is your father. After discussing things with your mother, we've decided that Christmas is off this year, at least with you. Your constant questioning of our finances and life choices has become intolerable. We're your parents, not your children or your clients. Since you're so concerned about money, you should expect a call from our lawyer after the holidays about removing your name from our mortgage. You've made your priorities clear, and sadly, family isn't among them. Don't call back. We need space from your controlling behavior. The gift ribbon slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. I replayed the message, certain I had misunderstood something. The second time was worse. The cold fury in Dad's voice, the finality of his words. My vision blurred, and a strange ringing filled my ears. This wasn't a negotiation or even an argument. It was a complete severing. Ryan found me sitting motionless among scattered wrapping paper, staring at nothing. When I wordlessly handed him my phone and played the message, his expression shifted from concern to disbelief to anger. This is unbelievable, Jess. After everything you've done for them? And they're threatening you with a lawyer? He knelt beside me, taking my ice-cold hands in his. What do you want to do? Call them back? Go over there? For several minutes, I couldn't speak. Memories cascaded through my mind. Dad teaching me to ride a bike, Mom bandaging my scraped knees, family vacations where we'd laughed until our sides hurt. But other memories surfaced too. The subtle guilt trips, the escalating financial demands, the dismissal of my boundaries, the conditional nature of their approval. In that moment, something crystallized within me, a clarity I'd been avoiding for years. No, I finally said, my voice steadier than I expected. I'm not going to call or go over. That's exactly what they want. Me panicking, begging for reconciliation, promising to ignore their financial irresponsibility. Not this time. Ryan watched me carefully. So, what will you do? I picked up my phone, typed a single word, understood, and sent it to my father. That's it? Ryan asked, surprised at my terseness. For now, yes, I replied, a plan already forming in my mind. But I'm done being financially entangled with them. If they want to talk lawyers, I'll beat them to it. That afternoon, while Ryan finished Christmas shopping, I researched mortgage co-signing laws in our state. What I discovered surprised me. As a co-signer who didn't live in the property, I had legal pathways to remove myself from the mortgage without their permission under certain conditions. I made calls to 3 different financial advisors, finally finding one who could see me immediately. Walking into Laura Mendez's office that afternoon felt like the first decisive step toward freedom. "Your situation is unfortunately common," she said after I explained everything. "Family financial entanglements are among the most complicated to unwind emotionally and legally." She reviewed the mortgage documents I'd brought, her expression growing more concerned. "Jessica, did you realize they've taken out 2 home equity lines of credit since you co-signed?" I hadn't known. Further analysis revealed they had borrowed against nearly all the available equity in the home, an additional $120,000 beyond the original mortgage. "The good news," Laura explained, "is that you're only on the primary mortgage, not these equity lines. But given their spending patterns and these threats, we need to act quickly to protect you." She recommended a specific attorney specializing in real estate law, making a call that secured me an appointment for later that day. The attorney, Marcus Chen, reviewed my documents and confirmed what Laura had suggested. I could petition for removal based on proof that I no longer had financial interest in or benefit from the property, combined with evidence of the co-borrower's threatening behavior. "It's not instantaneous," he warned, "but we can expedite the process given the circumstances. The bank will ultimately make the final decision, but with your excellent credit history and their recent borrowing activity, you have a strong case." Walking to my car afterward, I felt a strange mixture of grief and determination. I was about to sever one of the most fundamental financial ties to my parents, a step that would likely change our relationship forever. For a moment, my resolve wavered. Should I try one more conversation? Give them one more chance to understand my perspective? Then I remembered my father's voicemail, the cold dismissal in his voice, the casual way they had leveraged my financial stability for years while dismissing my concerns. I called Ryan. "I'm doing it," I told him. "I'm removing myself from their mortgage." His response was immediate and supportive. "Whatever you need, I'm here. This is the right move, Jess." That evening, we canceled our Christmas Eve gathering plans and began the process of returning or repurposing the perishable food I'd purchased. Looking at our beautiful home decorated for a family celebration that wouldn't happen, I allowed myself 30 minutes to cry. For the family I thought we were, for the Christmas I had planned, for the relationship I now realized had been built on emotional manipulation. Then I dried my tears, opened my laptop, and began meticulously documenting every financial transaction between my parents and me over the past 6 years. By midnight, I had compiled irrefutable evidence of a disturbing pattern. Their requests always escalated after my financial successes. Their emergencies were frequently followed by luxury purchases, and their promises of repayment had never once been fulfilled. Armed with this documentation and the guidance from both financial and legal advisors, I went to bed with a plan in place and a strange sense of calm. For the first time in years, I felt like I was choosing myself, not selfishly, but in recognition that healthy relationships cannot exist alongside financial exploitation, even when it's disguised as family need. Christmas Eve morning dawned gray and rainy, matching my mood as I prepared for a day very different from what I'd planned. Instead of welcoming family for a joyous celebration, I was gathering bank statements, mortgage documents, and correspondence for my appointment with the bank. Ryan offered to come with me, but this felt like something I needed to handle alone. "I'll be fine," I assured him, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Maybe you can start taking down some of the decorations while I'm gone." The Christmas tree and decorations that had brought me so much joy now felt like painful reminders of shattered expectations. The local branch of Mid-State Bank was nearly empty when I arrived. Most people were finishing last-minute shopping or preparing for holiday gatherings, not initiating complex financial procedures. Vanessa Johnson, the mortgage specialist I'd spoken with earlier, was waiting for me in a small glass-walled office decorated with a tiny artificial tree. "Not how you plan to spend Christmas Eve, I imagine," she said sympathetically, gesturing for me to sit. For the next 2 hours, we reviewed my situation in painstaking detail. I provided the documentation from my attorney about my legal rights. As a co-signer, financial statements proving I received no benefit from the property, and evidence of the threatening communication from my father. "This is certainly an unusual situation," Vanessa admitted, "but not unprecedented. The bank's primary concern is ensuring the loan remains secure." She explained that removing me would require a review of my parents' current financial situation, a process that could potentially trigger a reevaluation of their creditworthiness. If their financial position has deteriorated, or if they've taken on significant additional debt, the bank might require them to refinance under different terms, she warned. Are you prepared for that possibility? The question gave me pause. Was I ready to potentially cause my parents serious financial difficulty? The doubt must have shown on my face because Vanessa added gently, Jessica, you mentioned they have substantial equity lines already. If they're struggling to manage this situation won't improve by maintaining the status quo. She was right, of course. Continuing as their financial safety net wasn't helping them develop better habits. It was enabling behavior that would eventually collapse anyway, potentially taking my financial security down with it. I understand, I said finally. Please, proceed with the removal process. Vanessa began preparing the necessary paperwork, explaining each document before I signed. The removal wasn't instantaneous. There would be a review period, during which the bank would evaluate my parents' ability to maintain the mortgage without my income and credit supporting it. Best case scenario, this process is within 72 hours, due to our expedited request, she explained. It could take longer with the holidays, but I've flagged it as urgent based on the circumstances. As I signed the final document requesting my removal from the mortgage obligation, my hand trembled, slightly. This signature represented more than a financial decision. It was the first concrete step in dismantling a dysfunctional pattern that had defined our relationship for years. Walking to my car afterward, I checked my phone, half expecting angry messages from my parents. There were none, just Christmas wishes from friends and colleagues unaware of the family drama unfolding. The silence from my parents was both a relief and unsettling. Did they assume their threat had cowed me into submission? Were they enjoying their Christmas Eve, believing they'd successfully put me in my place? Driving home, I passed houses with twinkling lights and families carrying wrapped presents inside, and a wave of grief washed over me. Despite everything, I mourned the loss of the family I had believed in, the one I had desperately tried to preserve through years of financial and emotional concessions. Ryan was waiting with hot chocolate and quiet understanding when I returned. How did it go? He asked, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. The process is started, I replied, leaning into his embrace. Now we wait. That evening, as darkness fell on Christmas Eve, I experienced moments of paralyzing doubt. Had I overreacted? Should I call my parents and try one more time to work things out? I even picked up my phone several times, finger hovering over my father's contact. Each time, I forced myself to replay his voicemail, reminding myself of the cold dismissal in his voice, the threat of legal action, the years of manipulation. You're doing the right thing, Ryan reassured me, finding me staring at my silent phone again. Their reaction to your completely reasonable concerns was to cut you off and threaten you legally. That's not how loving parents behave. He was right, but the rational knowledge didn't ease the emotional turmoil. I'd been raised to believe that family loyalty trumped everything, that good daughters sacrificed for their parents without question or complaint. Breaking free of that programming felt physically painful, like tearing adhesions that had formed around my heart. The bank would be closed for Christmas Day, so nothing would progress until at least December 26th. The waiting period stretched before me like an abyss. To distract myself, I threw my energy into repurposing our Christmas celebration. Ryan and I decided to volunteer at a local homeless shelter Christmas morning, serving breakfast to people who truly had nowhere else to go. It felt fitting somehow, channeling my hurt into service rather than self-pity. That night, I dreamed of my childhood home. But in the dream, the doors and windows were locked against me, while I could see my family celebrating inside without me. I woke at 3 a.m., tears streaming down my face. Ryan stirred beside me. Same dream? He asked quietly. It wasn't the first time I'd woken crying since this began. I nodded, unable to speak through the tightness in my throat. Come here, he said, pulling me close. You're not alone, Jess. Not now, not ever. Wrapped in his unwavering support, I eventually drifted back to sleep. Christmas Day passed in a blur of activity at the shelter, followed by a quiet dinner at home with just Ryan and me. My brother Michael had texted that morning, "Merry Christmas, I guess," but made no mention of our parents or the canceled family gathering. I replied with a simple, "Merry Christmas to you too," and left it at that. No word came from my parents. The silence was deafening, but also instructive. They were still expecting me to make the first move, to come begging for reconciliation. They didn't realize yet that something fundamental had changed. On December 26th, I received confirmation from Vanessa that my removal request was being processed on an expedited basis. The bank has initiated contact with the primary borrowers, she informed me. We should have a decision within 24-48 hours. The countdown had begun. I knew that once my parents were notified by the bank, the fragile silence would shatter. With grim determination, I prepared for the storm. The morning after Christmas, I woke with a strange sense of calm. The initial shock and emotional turmoil had settled into a steady resolve. I went through my normal routine: morning run, shower, breakfast with Ryan, as if the foundation of my family relationships wasn't being dismantled with each passing hour. Ryan watched me carefully as I sipped my coffee and scrolled through work emails. "You seem different today," he observed, buttering his toast. "More centered." I considered his observation. "I think I've moved past the shock and grief, at least temporarily. Now I'm just determined to see this through." It was true. Having initiated the process, I felt a surprising sense of control, as if I'd finally stepped off a runaway carousel that had been making me dizzy for years. The bank had estimated 24-48 hours for processing, which meant my parents could be notified anytime between today and tomorrow. Each time my phone buzzed, my heart rate spiked, but it was never them. Just friends checking in about Christmas, colleagues with last-minute questions before the new year, promotions from retailers launching post-holiday sales. The ordinary world continued spinning, oblivious to my private upheaval. To channel my nervous energy, I created a detailed spreadsheet documenting every financial transaction between my parents and me since I'd started my career. Loan amounts, dates, promises made, evidence of their subsequent purchases. The pattern was even more disturbing when laid out chronologically. $4,500 for emergency plumbing repairs, followed by Dad's new golf clubs 2 weeks later. $8,000 for catching up on the mortgage, the same month Mom bought designer furniture. $12,000 for medical bills right before they took a luxury Alaskan cruise. None of these loans had ever been repaid. Over 6 years, the total exceeded $65,000, not including the mortgage I'd co-signed. Seeing the numbers in black and white reinforced my decision. This wasn't ordinary parental support. It was systematic financial exploitation disguised as family need. Ryan found me staring at the spreadsheet, my expression hardening as I added details to each entry. "Building a case?" he asked, peering over my shoulder. "More like creating clarity," I replied. "I need to see the reality without the emotional fog. When they start calling, and they will, I need to remember exactly why I'm doing this." As the day progressed, I experienced waves of conflicting emotions. Determination followed by doubt. Righteous anger followed by crushing guilt. During one particularly difficult moment, I found myself on my parents' Facebook page, looking at photos. From previous Christmases, smiling family portraits that gave no hint of the dysfunction beneath the surface. "This is self-torture," Ryan said gently, closing my laptop. "Come on, let's get out of the house." We spent the afternoon walking through a nearby nature preserve, the winter sunshine and physical activity helping to quiet my churning thoughts. That evening, just after dinner, the first text arrived from my mother. "Jessica, the bank called today with some concerning information. Please call us immediately." No mention of the voicemail, the canceled Christmas, the threats. Just an expectation that I would jump to address their concerns, as I always had before. I showed Ryan the message without responding. "And so it begins," he said, squeezing my hand. "Are you ready?" I nodded, though ready didn't quite capture the complex mixture of dread and determination I felt. We had discussed my strategy. Maintain silence for the full 48-hour processing period. Don't engage until the removal was complete. Don't give them an opportunity to manipulate me into changing course. The second message came an hour later, this time from Dad. "Jessica, this bank situation is a misunderstanding. Call me ASAP." Again, I didn't respond. By the time we went to bed, I had received 5 more increasingly urgent messages. The last one showed the first crack in their facade. Honey, whatever's upset you, we can fix it. Please don't do anything. Hasty with the mortgage. We need to talk. I slept fitfully that night, dreaming of ringing phones and unsigned documents. The next morning brought the first voicemail from my mother, her voice tight with controlled panic. Jessica, the bank says you're trying to remove yourself from our mortgage. They're reviewing our financials now. You need to call them and stop this process immediately. This isn't a game. This is our home. By noon, the messages were coming every 30 minutes, alternating between my parents with occasional texts, from Michael asking why I wasn't responding to Mom and Dad. I silenced my phone, focusing instead on preparing for the conversation I knew was coming. With Ryan's help, I drafted talking points, clear, unemotional statements about my boundaries, expectations, and the path forward. Remember, Ryan coached, this isn't a negotiation. You're informing them of your decision, not asking for permission. Around 3 p.m., I received an email from Vanessa at the bank. The removal process is proceeding. The primary borrowers have been notified and the financial review is underway. I'll update you when it's complete. Reading those words, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The process was working. The machinery of financial disentanglement was in motion, independent of my parents' attempts to stop it. By evening, my parents had escalated to having friends and extended family contact me. My Aunt Susan called, clearly uncomfortable with her assigned role. Your parents asked me to reach out. They say there's some confusion about the mortgage. They're pretty upset, Jessica. I explained briefly that this was between my parents and me, thanked her for her concern, and politely ended the call. The pressure was mounting exactly as I had anticipated. This was the pattern. When direct demands didn't work, they mobilized others to apply pressure, making me feel isolated and unreasonable. But this time, with Ryan's steadfast support and my own clarity about the situation, their tactics weren't working. The second morning, marking approximately 48 hours since I'd initiated the process, began with an unexpected development. A call from an unknown number turned out to be Thomas Greenberg, my parents' attorney. Unlike my parents' emotional messages, his voicemail was measured but concerned. Ms. Winters, this is Thomas Greenberg representing Robert and Linda Winters. I understand there's a situation developing with their mortgage that requires immediate attention. My clients are extremely concerned about the potential implications. Please contact me at your earliest convenience to discuss resolving this matter before it escalates further. I forwarded the voicemail to Marcus Chen, my own attorney, who advised me to continue maintaining silence until we received final confirmation from the bank. We're in the home stretch, he assured me. Don't engage until the process is complete. By mid-afternoon, my missed call count had reached a staggering number: 42 calls from my parents, 13 from Michael, 8 from their lawyer, and 5 from various family friends, 68 missed calls in total. Texts and voicemails piled up, their tone evolving from demanding to pleading as the reality of their situation apparently dawned on them. At 4:17 p.m., the email I'd been waiting for arrived from Vanessa. Process complete. You have been successfully removed as co-signer from the mortgage on the property at 1842 Oakwood Lane. The primary borrowers have been notified of this change and its implications for their loan terms going forward. I sat staring at the screen, a complex wave of emotions washing over me: relief, vindication, grief, and something unexpected: freedom. For the first time in years, my financial future was truly my own. The document attached to Vanessa's email made it official. I was no longer legally tied to my parents' financial decisions. Whatever happened with their mortgage now was entirely their responsibility. The moment was bittersweet, a necessary separation, but one that carried profound implications for our relationship moving forward. I forwarded the confirmation to Marcus, who replied almost immediately. Congratulations! You've taken an important step toward financial independence. Now we can prepare for the conversation that will inevitably follow. As if on cue, my phone began ringing again, my father's name flashing on the screen with a persistence that would have intimidated me just days earlier. This time, I felt ready to answer, but not quite yet. First, I needed to center myself completely in my new reality. I turned to Ryan, who had been my anchor throughout this process. It's done, I told him, showing him the email. I'm free. He pulled me into a tight embrace. You've been so brave, Jess. I'm incredibly proud of you. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of establishing new boundaries with my family. Boundaries based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation. Tonight, I would allow myself to process the complex emotions of this necessary ending. The calls continued into the evening, but for once, I didn't feel responsible for immediately addressing my parents' crisis. Their financial reckoning had been inevitable. I had simply stopped postponing it at my own expense. As the 48-hour window closed, I prepared to enter a new phase, one where I would engage, but on completely different terms than ever before. The morning after receiving confirmation that I'd been removed from the mortgage, I woke to find 68 missed calls accumulated over the past 2 days, 37 from Dad, 22 from Mom, 5 from Michael, and 4 from unknown numbers that voicemails revealed were from my parents' lawyer. The sheer volume was staggering, nearly 3 calls per hour, around the clock for 2 days straight. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold as I methodically listened to each voicemail, documenting the progression of their reactions in a notebook. The evolution was telling. The earliest messages were commanding. Jessica, call us immediately about this bank nonsense. Then came indignation. I can't believe you would do this without discussing it with us first. This is completely irresponsible. As hours passed without my response, the tone shifted to fake concern. Honey, we're worried about you. This isn't like you. Has Ryan put you up to this? Next came thinly veiled threats. You don't want to damage our relationship permanently over a misunderstanding. Think about what you're doing to this family. By the second day, panic had set in. The bank is asking for financial statements. We don't have. They're talking about reassessing loan terms. Please, Jessica, you need to fix this. The final messages revealed desperation. Jessie, please. We could lose the house. Everything we've worked for. Don't do this to us. My father's voice, which had been so cold and dismissive in his Christmas Eve message, now trembled with fear. My mother openly sobbed in her last voicemail, begging me to call them back. The messages from their lawyer, Thomas Greenberg, were more measured but conveyed increasing urgency. Ms. Winters, my clients are facing potential significant financial restructuring due to your actions. I strongly encourage you to contact me to discuss potential remedies before their position deteriorates further. Michael's messages were the most personally cutting. What the hell, Jess? Mom's having anxiety attacks. Dad hasn't slept. All because you're throwing some tantrum about Christmas? Grow up and fix this now. The irony of being told to grow up by my younger brother who still lived rent-free with our parents was not lost on me. Ryan sat beside me as I finished the last voicemail, his expression a mixture of concern and support. How are you feeling? He asked quietly. I considered the question carefully. Oddly calm, I replied finally, and certain. For the first time in years, I feel certain about setting these boundaries. I called Marcus Chen, my attorney, updating him on the barrage of communication and seeking his guidance before responding. This reaction is exactly why we expedited the process, he noted. They clearly relied on your financial backing more than they admitted. Now that you've heard them out, I think it's time for a clear, documented response from our side. Following Marcus's advice, I spent the afternoon crafting a comprehensive email to my parents, their lawyer, and Marcus. It detailed my decision, the reasons behind it, and my conditions for future communication, all expressed in factual, unemotional language. No accusations, no recriminations, just clear statements of reality and boundaries. I have removed myself from the mortgage at 1842 Oakwood Lane, effective December 27th. This decision is final and legally executed, I began. This action follows years of financial entanglement that has become untenable, culminating in the threatening voicemail I received on December 23rd, stating Christmas was off, and I should expect a call from your lawyer. I attached a transcript of that voicemail for reference, along with a summary of the $65,000 in unpaid loans over the past 6 years. I continued. Moving forward, I am open to rebuilding our relationship, but only on terms that respect my financial and emotional boundaries. These include 1. No requests for money, loans, or financial guarantees of any kind. 2. Acknowledgement of past patterns of financial manipulation. 3. Family counseling if we choose to attempt reconciliation. I concluded. I am taking a 30-day break from communication to allow everyone time to process this change. After January 27th, I welcome conversation that respects these boundaries. Any contact attempting to manipulate, threaten, or pressure me before that date will result in an extended period of no contact. After reviewing it with Ryan and making a few adjustments, I sent the email, then immediately turned off my phone. 30 days of peace, I said, looking at Ryan with a mixture of determination and relief. I need that time to rebuild my sense of self without their voices in my head. Ryan nodded, understanding completely. I think that's wise. They need time to accept that their old tactics won't work anymore. We had anticipated that my parents might escalate to showing up at our house, so we had made arrangements to stay with Ryan's brother in a neighboring city for a few days. As we packed overnight bags, I felt a strange sense of being a refugee from my own family, displaced by toxic dynamics I could no longer tolerate. The next morning, before we left, a certified letter arrived from Thomas Greenberg. Inside was a formal response that struck a markedly different tone from his urgent voicemails. My clients have asked me to evaluate their options regarding the mortgage situation. Upon review of the documentation, I must advise them that your removal as co-signer was executed legally and appropriately. The bank's reassessment of their loan terms is a standard procedure following such a change. The letter continued. While my clients are understandably distressed by this development and its timing, I have counseled them that pursuing legal action against you would be inadvisable and unlikely to succeed. I have recommended they focus instead on restructuring their finances to accommodate the new mortgage terms. Reading between the lines, it was clear their lawyer had recognized the weakness of their position and advised them accordingly. This confirmation that I had acted within my rights provided additional validation of my decision. By that afternoon, we were settled at Ryan's brother's apartment, temporarily insulated from the immediate fallout. My email auto-response was active, informing anyone who contacted me that I was taking a break from communication until January 27th. I had notified my workplace that I was dealing with a family situation and would be working remotely for a week. Though I'd turned off my personal phone, I checked my email once daily, filtering messages through Ryan to protect my peace of mind. 3 days after sending my email, the first message from Michael arrived. Not the angry tirade I'd expected, but something more thoughtful. Jess, I was wrong to come at you like I did. I didn't know about Dad's voicemail or all the money they've borrowed. Mom finally showed me their credit card statements and home equity line. It's worse than I realized. I'm trying to help them figure things out, but it's a mess. I'm sorry for what I said. When you're ready to talk, I'm here. His message gave me hope that at least one family relationship might survive this upheaval. A week into my self-imposed communication break, I received an unexpected email from my mother's sister, Aunt Catherine, who had always been the family truth teller. Jessica, I've heard Robert and Linda's version of events, but I know there are always two sides. Whatever happened, know that standing up for yourself isn't wrong. They've always leaned too heavily on you. Take the time you need. Family should lift you up, not drain you dry. Her support was a balm to my soul, confirmation that I wasn't crazy or selfish for establishing boundaries. As January unfolded, I worked with my therapist, Dr. Martinez, to process the complex emotions surrounding my decision. What you're feeling is grief, she explained during one particularly difficult session. Not just for the relationship you've lost, but for the relationship you deserved but never had. It's also grief for the identity you're shedding, the role of perpetual caretaker and financial safety net. With her guidance, I developed a communication plan for eventually re-engaging with my family, a structured approach that included recognizing manipulation tactics, setting clear time limits for conversations, and having prepared responses for predictable scenarios. You're not cutting them off permanently, Dr. Martinez reminded me. You're creating a healthier dynamic that protects your well-being. That's not selfish. It's necessary for any relationship to be sustainable. As the end of January approached, I felt stronger and clearer than I had in years. The constant anxiety that had accompanied every interaction with my parents had diminished, replaced by a calm certainty about my boundaries. I was ready for whatever came next, whether reconciliation on new terms or the painful acceptance that some relationships cannot be salvaged if one party refuses to acknowledge harmful patterns. On January 26th, the day before my communication break was set to end, I received a brief email from my father, the first direct contact from either of my parents since my boundary-setting message. It contained just 3 sentences. We've met with a financial advisor to address our situation. Your mother and I would like to talk when you're ready. We understand things need to change. It wasn't an apology or an acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused, but it was a start. A small indication that perhaps they were beginning to recognize the reality of our new dynamic. Tomorrow, I would respond, taking the first careful step toward whatever our relationship would become. But it would be on my terms, with my boundaries firmly in place, and with the knowledge that I was no longer financially tethered to their choices. 24 hours after receiving my father's brief email, my self-imposed communication break officially ended. After carefully considering my response with input from both Ryan and Dr. Martinez, I sent a short reply. I appreciate your willingness to talk. I suggest meeting at Riverside Cafe this Saturday at 11 a.m. I'll be bringing Ryan for support. Choosing a public location was deliberate, a neutral space where emotional outbursts would be constrained, with a clear endpoint since the cafe closed at 1 p.m. Having Ryan present wasn't negotiable. I needed his grounding presence to help me maintain my boundaries. Dad replied within minutes. We'd prefer to meet at home, just family. His attempt to control the terms wasn't surprising. I responded firmly, Riverside Cafe, Saturday, 11 a.m., with Ryan. Those are my terms for this first conversation. After a longer pause, he acquiesced. Fine, we'll be there. The days leading up to Saturday were filled with preparation. Dr. Martinez helped me anticipate various scenarios and practice responses that maintained boundaries without escalating conflict. Remember, she advised, you're not responsible for their emotions or reactions. Focus on clearly stating your position, not justifying or defending it. The morning of the meeting, I woke with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Ryan found me at the kitchen table, rehearsing my talking points. You've got this, he assured me, squeezing my shoulders. Just remember, you're not the one who needs to fix anything here. When we arrived at the cafe, my parents were already seated at a corner table. Mom looked smaller somehow, her usually perfect makeup unable to hide the strain of recent weeks. Dad sat rigidly, his jaw tight. Neither stood to hug me, the first indication that this was indeed a different kind of family meeting. Ryan and I sat across from them, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. You've put us in a very difficult position, Jessica. His opening line confirmed my suspicion that we weren't here for an apology. The bank has given us 60 days to either qualify for the mortgage on our own or find a new cosigner. Our monthly payment will increase by $640 if we refinance under current rates. I let his statement hang in the air, resisting the familiar urge to offer solutions or express sympathy. After an uncomfortable silence, I responded evenly, I understand. This is a challenging transition. As outlined in my email, I'm open to rebuilding our relationship, but not our financial entanglement. Mom interjected, her voice quavering. How could you do this to us, Jessie? After everything we've done for you? We're your parents. It was the guilt tactic I'd anticipated. I took a slow breath before responding. I'm not here to relitigate the past. I'm here to discuss how we move forward with healthier boundaries. Dad's face flushed. Boundaries? We gave you life, raised you, paid for your education. Now when we need help, you talk about boundaries? Ryan shifted beside me, a subtle reminder of his support. I maintained eye contact with my father. Yes, boundaries. Like not threatening me with lawyers when I expressed concern about financial decisions. Like not canceling Christmas as punishment for questioning the mortgage I co-signed. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. That was your father's anger talking. He didn't mean it. He did mean it, I countered calmly. And it was the culmination of a pattern, not an isolated incident. I placed a folder on the table containing printouts of my financial documentation. Over the past 6 years, I've provided $65,130 in loans that were never repaid, co-signed a $380,000 mortgage, and been added as guarantor to credit cards I never used. That's in addition to the emotional cost of being made to feel selfish whenever I question these arrangements. Dad barely glanced at the documents. So you're keeping score? That's what family means to you, a balance sheet? No, I replied steadily. Family means mutual respect and support, not one-way financial dependence disguised as parental authority. Our conversation continued in this vein for nearly an hour, my parents alternating between guilt tactics, minimizing their actions, and expressing indignation at my betrayal. Each time I calmly redirected to the core issue. Their behavior had damaged our relationship, and rebuilding would require acknowledgement and changed patterns. The turning point came unexpectedly when I mentioned the Caribbean cruise they'd booked while claiming to be unable to pay their property taxes. Dad waved dismissively. That was a special anniversary celebration. Everyone deserves some luxury. Funded by whose luxury? I asked quietly. The $12,000 I gave you that month for what you said were medical bills? Mom's expression changed suddenly, eyes widening as she turned to Dad. You told me that cruise was paid for with your year-end bonus. A heavy silence fell over the table. Dad shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Mom's questioning gaze. Robert, she pressed, did you use Jessica's money for our cruise? His non-answer was answer enough. Mom turned to me, genuine shock on her face. I didn't know Jesse. He told me different stories about where the money was coming from. It was the first crack in their united front, the first indication that perhaps their financial deception had layers I hadn't even recognized. For the remainder of our meeting, a subtle shift occurred. Mom asked more questions, listening with growing distress as I outlined the pattern of financial manipulation. Dad became increasingly defensive, eventually muttering that he needed air and stepping outside. With him gone, Mom spoke more freely. Things have been worse than I realized, she admitted quietly. The home equity lines, credit card debt. I signed papers without fully understanding what they meant. Robert handles the finances. Mom, I said gently, you're an adult with equal responsibility in this marriage. Not knowing doesn't excuse the impact on me. She nodded slowly, tears spilling onto her cheeks. I know, I don't know how we got here. Or how to fix it. As we prepared to leave, Dad returned, his expression closed and defensive. I outlined my conditions for moving forward: financial transparency, family counseling, and absolute adherence to the boundary of no money requests. And if we refuse these conditions? Dad asked stiffly. Then we'll have very limited contact, I replied simply. I won't subject myself to patterns that have proven harmful. Outside the cafe, Ryan held my hand tightly as we watched my parents drive away. You did amazing, he said. How are you feeling? Lighter, I realized, like I've finally said things I've needed to say for years. The aftermath of our confrontation unfolded in unexpected ways. That evening, Michael called, his first direct contact since his apologetic email. Mom's a mess, he began, but without his earlier accusatory tone. She says she didn't know about a lot of the financial stuff, that Dad kept her in the dark. And you believe her? I asked cautiously. He sighed heavily. I don't know what to believe anymore. I found papers in Dad's office yesterday. They've remortgaged the house twice. There are credit cards I never knew about. It's worse than either of us realized, Jess. For the first time, Michael and I had a genuine conversation about our parents' behavior, not as adversaries, but as adult siblings trying to understand a troubling family dynamic. 2 days later, I received separate emails from my parents. Mom's was contrite, acknowledging her complicity through inaction and expressing a willingness to try family counseling. Dad's was briefer and less yielding, but he agreed to discuss these issues further in a professional setting. Their lawyer, Thomas Greenberg, also reached out with an unexpected disclosure. In the interest of transparency, I feel professionally obligated to inform you that your parents consulted me last year about adding your name to additional financial instruments without your direct knowledge. I advised against this course of action as it would potentially constitute fraud. This revelation confirmed my worst suspicions. The financial entanglement might have gone even deeper had they found a less ethical attorney. As January turned to February, our family entered uncharted territory. The mortgage situation remained unresolved, my parents scrambling to either qualify on their own or find an alternative solution. Our relationship hung in a fragile balance, the old patterns broken, but new ones not yet established. What had become clear through our confrontation was that the financial manipulation had been largely driven by my father, with my mother's complicit ignorance enabling his behavior. This didn't excuse her role, but it added nuance to our path forward. The power dynamic had fundamentally shifted. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't approaching my parents from a position of obligation or guilt, but from a place of clear-eyed agency. Whether our relationship could be rebuilt on healthier terms remained to be seen, but I had done the necessary work of breaking the damaging patterns of the past. As Dr. Martinez reminded me in our session following the confrontation, family relationships should be maintained because they're nurturing and supportive, not out of obligation or fear. You've created the space for something healthier to potentially grow. That space, painful as it was to create, felt like the most honest gift I could give to both my family and myself. By mid-February, news of our family rift had spread through the extended family grapevine, creating ripple effects I hadn't fully anticipated. Aunt Susan called first, her voice tight with disapproval. Family problems should stay private, Jessica. Your parents are devastated by this public embarrassment. Uncle Jim took a different stance, calling to offer support. About time someone stood up to Robert's financial shenanigans. He tried to rope me into co-signing a boat loan last year. Cousins weighed in via text and social media messages, some expressing sympathy, others suggesting I was overreacting to normal family dynamics. The spectrum of reactions highlighted how differently people viewed financial boundaries in family relationships. My maternal grandmother, Nana Beth, surprised everyone by firmly taking my side. At 82, she drove herself to my house one Saturday morning, armed with homemade cookies and blunt wisdom. Your grandfather and I helped your parents when they were starting out, she explained, settling into my sofa. Small things, down payment for their first apartment, occasional grocery money when times were tight. But Robert developed a taste for assistance that never went away. It worried your grandfather to his dying day. Her validation meant more than she could know, confirmation from someone who loved my parents, but recognized the unhealthy patterns. Meanwhile, my parents were facing the harsh reality of their financial situation without my support. Dad reluctantly took a part-time job at a local hardware store to supplement his declining real estate income. Mom began selling her extensive collection of designer purses and jewelry on consignment. Michael reported they were meeting with financial advisors and considering downsizing to a smaller home, painful but necessary steps toward living within their actual means. The bank had extended their qualification period by 30 days after. They made a good faith payment toward the principal, but the deadline still loomed. Michael's role evolved in unexpected ways. Initially my parents' defender, he had become a reluctant mediator as he discovered more about their financial reality. Dad had a complete meltdown yesterday, he confided during one of our weekly phone calls. The financial advisor laid everything out. The credit card debt, the underwater mortgage, the loan from his brother he never repaid. Mom just sat there getting paler and paler. I didn't know what to say. For the first time in our adult lives, Michael and I were truly talking, not as competitors for parental approval, but as siblings navigating a family crisis. He admitted feeling resentful at first about my financial independence. You always made it look so easy. Great job, nice home, healthy relationship. I guess I bought into Dad's narrative that you were just lucky, not that you actually worked for it. In turn, I acknowledged envying his seemingly uncomplicated relationship with our parents. You never seemed to disappoint them like I did. Every life choice I made was scrutinized, while you got automatic approval. These honest conversations began healing a sibling relationship that had been strained by our parents' differential treatment. 3 weeks after our confrontation at the cafe, we attempted our first family counseling session. I found a therapist specializing in financial trauma and family systems, Dr. Abigail Chen, who agreed to see us together. The session was tense, but productive, with Dr. Chen establishing clear ground rules about communication and respect. Dad participated minimally, answering direct questions but offering little voluntary insight. Mom was more engaged, tearfully acknowledging how her passivity had enabled destructive patterns. "I just wanted everyone to be happy," she explained. "It seemed easier to go along with things than to create conflict." Dr. Chen gently challenged this perspective. But someone was bearing the cost of that conflict avoidance. In this case, Jessica. The most revealing moment came when Dr. Chen asked my parents to articulate what they wanted from our relationship moving forward. Mom immediately said, "I just want my daughter back in my life." Dad's answer was more telling. "I want things to go back to how they were." When prompted to elaborate, he admitted, "I want Jessica to trust us again, financially." His honesty, however problematic, was at least a starting point for real discussion. After the session, Dr. Chen met with me privately. "Your father shows signs of financial dependence disorder," she explained. "It's similar to other dependencies. The brain develops reward pathways around getting financial support, making it extremely difficult to change the behavior without significant intervention." She recommended I maintain firm boundaries while they worked through their issues, suggesting separate counseling for my parents alongside our family sessions. The next month brought small, hesitant steps toward rebuilding. Mom began meeting me for coffee weekly without Dad, our conversations gradually becoming more authentic. During one such meeting, she confessed, "I've been looking at our old Christmas photos. Remember how you always wanted to put the star on top of the tree? Robert would lift you up on his shoulders even when you got too big, and you'd both laugh about how you'd topple over." Her eyes welled with tears. "I keep thinking about how we got from there to here." It was the first time either parent had expressed nostalgia for our relationship without using it as emotional leverage. Progress with Dad was slower and more complicated. At our third family counseling session, he finally admitted feeling humiliated by needing financial help. "A father should provide for his family, not the other way around," he stated gruffly. "Every time Jessica succeeded, it reminded me of my failures." This revelation explained so much about his behavior: the minimizing of my accomplishments, the escalating financial demands after my promotions, the constant reminders of all he had done for me. His self-worth had become dangerously entangled with financial control. By early April, my parents had made their decision about the house. They would sell it and move to a smaller condo that they could afford without financial support. The process was painful for them, involving letting go of not just a home, but the facade of financial success they had maintained for years. I maintained my boundary about not helping financially, but offered practical support by connecting them with a reliable real estate agent and helping Mom sort through decades of accumulated possessions. On moving day, I arrived with coffee and bagels, prepared to help box remaining items. Dad answered the door, looking older and more subdued than I had ever seen him. "Thanks for coming," he said simply, the first acknowledgement that my presence was a choice, not an obligation. As we worked alongside movers, Mom found a box of my childhood artwork they had saved, homemade cards expressing childhood adoration for my parents, school projects proudly brought home for their approval. "You were such a thoughtful child," she said softly, always trying so hard to make us proud. For a moment, we all stood in silence, the gap between that loving family and our current reality painfully evident. The process of healing remained complex and nonlinear. Some days brought progress, like when Dad actually apologized for the Christmas voicemail without qualifiers or excuses. Other days featured backsliding, Mom asking if I might just help a little with moving expenses, then quickly withdrawing the request when she saw my expression. Through it all, I maintained the boundaries I had established, neither yielding to guilt nor wielding my newfound power punitively. By late spring, a new normal had begun to emerge. My parents were living within their means for perhaps the first time in decades. Their condo modest but manageable, their lifestyle adjusted to reality rather than appearance. Our relationships were fundamentally changed, but not destroyed. More honest, if less comfortable, with new respect for stated boundaries. Most importantly, I had broken a cycle that would otherwise have continued draining my financial and emotional resources indefinitely. The experience had taught me to recognize similar patterns in other relationships, leading me to establish healthier boundaries with friends who consistently forgot their wallets at dinner or colleagues who expected free marketing advice outside work hours. As Dr. Martinez observed in one of our sessions, this wasn't just about money. It was about recognizing your inherent value beyond what you could provide to others. That recognition, hard-won through painful family reconfiguration, had become the unexpected gift of this difficult journey. 6 months after that fateful Christmas voicemail, summer sunshine warmed the patio of my backyard as I arranged chairs in a semicircle. "Is this enough seating?" I asked Ryan, who was manning the grill. "Michael said he might bring a friend, but I'm not sure if that's still happening." Ryan looked up from the sizzling hamburgers. "Better add one more just in case. First family barbecue at our place. Pretty big milestone." I nodded, feeling a mixture of nervousness and quiet pride. Today marked the first casual family gathering since the mortgage confrontation, a deliberately low-pressure event designed to test our new family dynamic. No holiday expectations, no overnight stays, just a few hours of shared food and conversation. As I set out plates and utensils, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The initial shock and pain had gradually given way to something unexpected. A more authentic relationship with my family, built on reality rather than obligation or pretense. My parents arrived precisely on time, another new development. Before, they would have shown up early with opinions about my hosting choices or called last minute with some reason for delay. Dad carried a store-bought dessert, Mom a bouquet of summer flowers. "The yard looks wonderful," Mom commented, genuinely admiring the garden beds Ryan and I had spent spring weekends creating. "You always did have a good eye for color combinations." Dad handed me the dessert box somewhat awkwardly. "Didn't know what you might want, so I got the sampler thing. The bakery lady said it's popular." The small gesture, choosing something with me in mind without assuming he knew best, represented significant growth. Michael arrived shortly after, bringing his friend Donna, a soft-spoken librarian he'd been dating for 2 months. Their relationship seemed to be nurturing a more thoughtful side of my brother that I'd rarely seen before. As we settled around the patio table with our food, the conversation remained lightweight. Neighborhood developments, Michael's new job in IT support, a funny story about Mom's book club selecting an accidentally risque novel. Beneath the ordinary topics, though, I noticed subtle but significant changes. Dad didn't dominate the conversation as he once would have. Mom asked follow-up questions about my recent work projects, showing genuine interest rather than comparing them to some imagined better alternative. Most notably, no one mentioned money. Not their financial situation, not my career success, not the cost of anything discussed. It wasn't that we were avoiding the topic. Rather, it had been rightfully relegated to its proper place in our relationship. Just one aspect of life, not the defining factor in our interactions. After dessert, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Dad as I brewed coffee. He leaned against the counter, looking out the window at Ryan and Michael discussing the vegetable garden. "I've been wanting to say something," he began, his voice quieter than usual. "But I needed to be sure I meant it first." I waited, giving him space to continue at his own pace. "I'm sorry, Jessica. Not just for the voicemail or the mortgage situation, but for years of taking advantage of your success and generosity. I convinced myself it was my due as your father." He turned to face me directly. "The financial counselor we've been seeing, he helped me see that I was using money as a form of control because I felt inadequate in other ways. It's no excuse, but I'm working to understand it so I don't repeat the pattern." The apology I had once desperately wanted now came when I no longer needed it for closure, yet it still mattered. "Thank you for saying that," I replied simply. "It helps." We carried the coffee outside together, a small moment of ordinary cooperation that felt symbolic of our gradually healing relationship. Later that evening, after everyone had left, Ryan and I sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies appear in the gathering dusk. "So?" he asked. "How do you think it went?" I considered the question carefully. "Better than I expected. Different, but in good ways. like we're all actually seeing each other clearly for the first time. The changes extended beyond my immediate family. In the months following the mortgage confrontation, I had re-examined all my relationships through the lens of this experience, identifying subtle patterns of financial or emotional imbalance I had previously accepted as normal. My friendship with Stephanie, who consistently forgot her wallet at our lunches, had evolved after a candid conversation about reciprocity. My tendency to over-volunteer at work had been replaced with healthier professional boundaries. Even my relationship with Ryan had deepened through the experience, his unwavering support giving me confidence to address smaller inequities before they became entrenched patterns. Perhaps most significantly, I had developed a new relationship with myself. The crushing guilt that had accompanied any act of self-care or boundary setting had diminished, replaced by recognition that maintaining my well-being wasn't selfish but necessary. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, had helped me identify and challenge the deeply ingrained belief that my value was tied to what I could provide for others. The greatest gift of this difficult experience, she noted in our most recent session, has been watching you reclaim your inherent worth independent of your usefulness to others. My parents' situation had stabilized in ways that would have been impossible had I continued enabling their financial irresponsibility. Living in the condo they could actually afford, they had begun rebuilding their financial foundation. Dad had taken a part-time position at a real estate training center, finding unexpected satisfaction in mentoring new agents. Mom had started a small alterations business, utilizing sewing skills she had previously treated as just a hobby. They would never be wealthy, but for the first time in decades, they were living honestly within their means. Michael had also grown. Through the experience, developing independence I hadn't thought possible. After moving out of our parents' house into a shared apartment, he had discovered capabilities previously obscured by the dysfunctional family dynamic. Our sibling relationship, once characterized by rivalry and resentment, had evolved into something resembling actual friendship. As summer transitioned to fall, we created new holiday traditions. Instead of the elaborate, financially strained celebrations of the past, we planned simpler gatherings focused on connection rather than appearance. For Thanksgiving, we would all contribute dishes to a meal at Michael's apartment. Christmas would be a brunch at the local botanical gardens with a strict spending limit on gifts. The approaching holiday season no longer filled me with dread, but with cautious optimism about continuing to build healthier family connections. On a crisp September evening, almost exactly 9 months after the voicemail that had changed everything, I sat at my desk writing in the journal Dr. Martinez had suggested I keep. Looking back over the entries from those first painful weeks, I could trace the evolution not just of my family relationships, but of my understanding of what family should be. True family, I had discovered, supports your growth rather than sabotaging it to maintain control. True family respects boundaries rather than treating them as betrayal. True love empowers rather than exploits. The mortgage situation, as painful as it had ultimately been the catalyst for transforming unhealthy patterns that might otherwise have continued indefinitely. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and others is to disrupt destructive cycles, even when that disruption causes temporary pain. I had learned that standing firm in my worth didn't mean abandoning love. It meant creating space for more authentic love to potentially flourish. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between maintaining peace and establishing necessary boundaries with family? I'd love to know how you handled it. Comment below and share your experience. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might need to hear that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's sometimes the most loving choice we can make. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and growth. Remember, true family supports your wings, not clips them to keep you close.
I'm Abigail Davis, 29 years old, and last winter I inherited my grandmother Margaret's cabin in the Adirondacks. Grandma and I were always close, which is why she left it specifically to me in her will. It was supposed to be my sanctuary, my escape from city life. Then last month, during Sunday dinner, my mother casually mentioned giving my younger sister Brooke a spare key. She should be able to use it whenever she wants, Mom said. Yesterday, I drove up to find something that made my blood boil. Before I tell you what I found, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If this story of family boundaries resonates with you, Please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. My grandmother Margaret wasn't just any grandmother. She was my confidant, my teacher, and my best friend. Every Saturday morning throughout my childhood, I'd visit her while my sister Brooke was at dance practice. Grandma taught me how to bake her famous apple pie, knit scarves that never seemed to end right, and tell stories that made ordinary life seem magical. We'd sit in her sunny kitchen with flour dusting our aprons, and she'd tell me about her adventures as a young woman in the 1950s. The cabin was special to us both. My grandfather Robert built it with his own hands in 1962, a labor of love that took him 3 summers to complete. It sat on 5 acres of wooded land with a small private beach on Lake George. The wraparound porch had the most perfect rocking chairs where Grandma and I would sit for hours watching hummingbirds dart around the feeders. Inside, the stone fireplace dominated the living room, lined with bookshelves filled with classics and mysteries. The kitchen still had the original cast iron stove that somehow made everything taste better. Every summer from ages 8 to 18, I spent 2 weeks at the cabin with Grandma. We'd pick blueberries for pancakes, swim in the cool lake water, and read books by the fire when it rained. Brooke would come for a few days with our parents, but she always complained about the mosquitoes and lack of internet. She preferred shopping malls to forest trails. When Grandma passed away last December, I was devastated. The funeral was beautiful but painful, with snow falling gently on the cemetery like powdered sugar on one of her cakes. A week later, we all gathered in Attorney Richard Wilson's office for the reading of the will. I remember his exact words. To my granddaughter Abigail, who shares my love of simple pleasures and quiet moments, I leave my cabin on Lake George and all its contents, with the hope that she finds the same peace there that I have. The room went silent. I could feel Brooke's eyes burning into me from across the table. My parents looked surprised, then concerned. Nobody had expected Grandma to leave her most valuable possession to just one of us. The cabin was worth at least $300,000, not including the land. She should have split it between both girls, my mother Elizabeth whispered to my father Thomas. It's not fair to Brooke. That comment stung, but it wasn't surprising. My relationship with Brooke has always been complicated. 2 years younger than me, she grew up being the family star. She was the cheerleader, the prom queen, the one with the magnetic personality that drew attention in any room. I was the responsible one, the steady achiever, the one who never caused problems. When Brooke crashed Dad's car at 16, they bought her a new one. When I needed college textbooks, I worked extra shifts at the campus bookstore. Back at my apartment in Albany, I tried to process Grandma's gift. My life hadn't been going as planned. My position as marketing executive for a healthcare startup meant 60-hour work weeks and constant stress. My boyfriend Jason and I had just broken up after 3 years because he accepted a job in Seattle without even discussing it with me. The cabin represented something I desperately needed: escape, healing, peace. For 3 months after inheriting it, I spent weekends cleaning, repairing, and making the cabin mine. I kept Grandma's quilts, her collection of blue willow china, and the photographs covering the walls. I added my own touches too: a new coffee maker, a writing desk by the window overlooking the lake, and faster internet that I could use to work remotely. Then came that Sunday dinner at my parents' house a month ago. Mom made her famous pot roast, Dad opened a bottle of Cabernet, and Brooke arrived 45 minutes late as usual. We were just finishing the main course when Mom casually mentioned, "Oh, Abby, I gave Brooke the spare key to the cabin. She's been stressed at work lately and needs a getaway spot. She should be able to use it whenever she wants. Family property should be for the whole family."
I nearly choked on my wine.
"You did what? Without asking me?" "Don't be dramatic," Dad said, refilling his glass. "It's just a key. Your grandmother would have wanted you to share." "I would have been happy to discuss a schedule for family visits," I said carefully, "but the cabin is legally mine." Grandma was very specific about that. Brooke rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, Abby. It's just a weekend here and there. It's not like you live there full time. Don't be so selfish." I tried to be understanding. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was being possessive. I took a deep breath and suggested, "How about we come up with some ground rules? I'd appreciate a heads up before anyone uses the cabin, and certain areas like Grandma's study should remain untouched." "That sounds very controlling," Mom said with a disappointed sigh. "We raised you to be more generous than this." The conversation moved on to Dad's golf tournament, but my stomach remained knotted. Later that evening, as I was leaving, Brooke hugged me and whispered, "Thanks for being cool about the cabin. I might go up next weekend if that's okay." I nodded, still uncomfortable but unwilling to cause more conflict. Over the next few weeks, Brooke texted me several times asking specific questions about the cabin, where the circuit breaker was, if the hot water heater was working, whether the grill on the deck had propane. I answered each one, trying to be helpful while ignoring the growing unease in my stomach. When she asked if the driveway could fit 4 cars, alarm bells started ringing in my head. "Planning to have company?" I texted back. "Just a couple friends." "No big deal," she replied with a smiley face emoji. That was 2 days ago. Yesterday, I decided to surprise myself with an impromptu long weekend at the cabin. I needed the mental health break, and the weather forecast promised perfect fall temperatures. I packed my laptop for some light work, 3 new mystery novels, and ingredients for comfort food. The 3-hour drive from Albany filled me with anticipation as maple and oak trees showed off their red and gold colors along the highway. This was exactly what I needed. The familiar gravel road leading to the cabin always gave me a sense of coming home. As I navigated the final curve through the pine trees, my peaceful mood evaporated. Brooke's red Jeep Cherokee sat in the driveway, alongside 3 other vehicles I didn't recognize: a black BMW convertible, a white pickup truck with oversized tires, and a silver Audi SUV. Loud music thumped from inside the cabin, some generic pop song with too much bass. I parked behind Brooke's Jeep and sat for a moment, trying to calm my racing heart. This wasn't a couple friends. This was a party. In my cabin. Without my permission. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside and froze in shock. My grandmother's cozy living room had been transformed into something unrecognizable. The antique coffee table was covered with empty beer bottles and pizza boxes. Someone had moved the leather sofa to face the window, leaving drag marks on the hardwood floor. 2 people I'd never seen before were sprawled on it, holding red plastic cups and scrolling through their phones. "Excuse me," I said loudly over the music. "Who are you?" They looked up, surprised but not concerned. A guy with a man bun said, "Oh, are you another friend of Brooke's? She's out back with the others." I didn't answer, just continued my stunned inspection of the cabin. The dining room was worse. Grandma's handmade lace tablecloth was stained with what looked like red wine and pizza sauce. Her antique oak chairs had been rearranged haphazardly, with one missing entirely. I found it on the porch, where someone had used it to prop open the screen door. Cigarette butts littered the porch railing, some having burned small marks into the wood. In the kitchen, dirty dishes filled the sink, and empty liquor bottles lined the counter. The refrigerator door stood open, its contents ransacked. A cast iron skillet that Grandma had meticulously seasoned for decades soaked in soapy water in the sink, already showing signs of rust. Each discovery felt like a physical blow. But the worst was yet to come. As I walked down the hallway toward the bedrooms, I noticed muddy footprints tracking across the hand-woven runner that Grandma had bought on her trip to New Mexico. The door to her bedroom, which I had carefully preserved as a sort of memorial to her, stood ajar. I pushed it open with a trembling hand. "What the hell, Brooke?" I whispered in horror. Grandma's patchwork quilt, sewn from pieces of her children's baby clothes, lay crumpled on the floor. The antique vanity had been repurposed as a makeshift bar, with bottles and glasses crowding the surface. The framed family photographs that had lined the walls were gone, replaced by a string of party lights haphazardly tacked into the log walls. A splash of laughter from outside drew me to the window. Through the glass, I could see a group of about 8 people on the dock. Some were drinking, others were smoking. Brooke sat in the center, leaning against her boyfriend Tyler, looking completely at ease, as if she owned the place. My place. I stormed outside, nearly tripping over an inflatable pool float someone had abandoned on the path. The group fell silent as I approached, Brooke's eyes widening in recognition. "Abby, what are you doing here?" Her tone suggested I was the one who didn't belong. "What am I doing here? This is my cabin, Brooke. What are all these people doing here?" Tyler, whom I'd always found condescending, draped his arm around Brooke protectively.
Whoa, chill out.
"We're just having a little get-together." "Did you see what you've done to the inside? Grandma's quilt is on the floor. Her tablecloth is ruined. There are cigarette burns on the porch." My voice kept rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Brooke had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, but quickly recovered. "Don't be so uptight. We'll clean up before we leave on Sunday." "Sunday? It's Thursday." "Yeah, we're staying the weekend. Mom and Dad said I could use it whenever I want." She emphasized the last part, mimicking our mother's voice. "They had no right to say that. This cabin belongs to me, not them." A tall blonde woman I didn't know leaned over to Brooke and stage whispered, "Is this the control freak sister you told us about?" That was it.
I felt something snap inside me.
"Everyone who doesn't belong here needs to leave.
Now."
Tyler stood up, using his 6-foot frame to tower over me. "Look, Princess, you can't just show up and kick everyone out. Brooke invited us for the weekend, and we've all taken time off work. You're being completely unreasonable." "Unreasonable? You've trashed my property, disrespected my grandmother's memory, and you're calling me unreasonable?" A small crowd had gathered now, watching the confrontation with the eager expressions of people hoping for drama. I suddenly felt outnumbered and overwhelmed. "You know what?" I said, fighting back tears. "I can't deal with this right now. But this isn't over, Brooke." I turned and walked back to the cabin, ignoring the whispers and snickers behind me. Inside, I grabbed my overnight bag, which I hadn't even unpacked, and headed for the door. The guy with the man bun watched me curiously from the sofa. "Family drama, huh?" he said with a smirk. I slammed the door behind me, threw my bag into the car, and drove away, hands shaking on the steering wheel. 15 minutes later, I checked into the Lakeside Inn in Lake Placid, a place I couldn't really afford but needed desperately. As soon as I closed the hotel room door, the tears came in earnest. I collapsed onto the bed and sobbed until my throat hurt and my eyes burned. The room's generic beige walls and floral bedspread felt like an insult after the careful restoration I'd done at the cabin. I pulled out my phone to call my best friend Lauren, but noticed 3 missed calls from my mother already. Brooke must have contacted her immediately. I wasn't ready for that conversation. Instead, I ran a hot bath in the hotel tub and tried to think clearly through my options. As I soaked, watching steam rise to the ceiling, I realized something important. This pattern had been repeating my entire life. Brooke takes what's mine. My parents enable her. I stepped back to keep the peace. Not this time. This time was different. The cabin wasn't just any possession. It was my inheritance, my connection to Grandma, my sanctuary. And I was done letting my family walk all over me. The hotel room phone jarred me awake at 7:30 the next morning. I fumbled for it, still groggy from a night of fitful sleep and anxious dreams. "Hello?" "Abigail Davis?" a crisp voice asked. "This is front desk. Your mother is in the lobby asking for your room number. Hotel policy prevents us from giving it out without your permission." My stomach clenched. How did she even know I was here?
I'm not sure, ma'am.
Should I send her up? I considered saying no, but that would only postpone the inevitable. "Yes, that's fine. Thank you." I barely had time to splash water on my face and pull on jeans and a sweater before a sharp knock came at the door. I opened it to find both my parents standing there, looking like they'd been up all night. Dad's silver hair was uncombed, and Mom still wore her gardening sweater. "What were you thinking, storming out like that?" Mom demanded before she even crossed the threshold. "Brooke called us in tears last night." "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "I'm sure she did." Dad paced the small room while Mom perched on the edge of the desk chair. Neither seemed interested in hearing my side. "You embarrassed your sister in front of her friends," Dad said. "She was just trying to have a relaxing weekend." Did she tell you what I found when I got there? Did she mention the cigarette burns on Grandma's porch? Or the stains on her heirloom tablecloth? Or the muddy footprints all over the rugs? Mom waved her hand dismissively. You're being too sensitive. It's just stuff, Abby. They're young people having fun. It's my stuff, I insisted. And they didn't just have fun. They were destructive and disrespectful. Dad sat heavily on the bed. Look, your grandmother would have wanted the cabin to be enjoyed, not treated like a museum. Brooke's going through a hard time at work. She needed this getaway. I'm going through a hard time too, I said, my voice rising. That's why I drove up yesterday. I needed peace and quiet, not a frat party. Well, if you had called ahead. Mom began. Called ahead? To my own property. I shouldn't have to make an appointment to use something that belongs to me. Dad's face reddened. That's exactly the kind of selfish attitude we're talking about. Family shares, Abigail. That's how we raised you. The conversation continued in this vein for 20 painful minutes. Every point I raised was dismissed. Every boundary I tried to establish was rejected as unreasonable. It felt like I was 10 years old again, watching Brooke break my science project the night before it was due with Mom telling me she didn't mean it. Don't make such a fuss. When they finally left, with pointed remarks about thinking about what's really important and growing up, I felt hollowed out. I lay back on the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling fan making slow circles above me. The familiar guilt began creeping in. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should just let it go. My phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. How's the cabin getaway? Peaceful. I called her immediately, the words pouring out in a rushed, emotional jumble. Lauren listened without interrupting, then said exactly what I needed to hear. Abby, this is insane. They're gaslighting you. The cabin is legally yours. You get to decide who uses it and when. Full stop. But they make me feel so selfish for wanting control over my own property, I said. That's because it's working for them, Lauren replied firmly. They've been playing you your whole life. Remember when Brooke borrowed your car in college and returned it with an empty tank and a dented fender? Or when she wore your new dress to that wedding and spilled wine all over it? She's never faced consequences, so why would she start now? The memories came flooding back. So many instances of Brooke taking my things without permission, damaging them, and facing zero repercussions. You're right, I said slowly. This is a pattern. Damn straight it is. And it's time to break it. What are you going to do? I opened my laptop and began researching property rights in New York State. The deed to the cabin was in my name. The will had been clear. There were no legal ambiguities here. Next, I called Attorney Wilson, who had handled Grandma's will. Ms. Davis, legally speaking, the situation is straightforward, he assured me after hearing my story. The property is solely yours. You have no obligation to allow family members to use it, with or without your presence. And you certainly have grounds for compensation for any damages they've caused. I don't want to sue my sister, I said, but I do want to establish clear boundaries. Sometimes, he said kindly, clear legal action is the only language some people understand. While I was still processing this advice, my phone lit up with a barrage of texts from Brooke. Way to ruin everyone's weekend. Tyler's friend Bradley drove all the way from Boston for this. Mom and Dad think you're being ridiculous. You've always been jealous of me. Grandma would be so disappointed in how selfish you've become. That last one hit like a physical blow. I felt my chest tighten and my breathing become shallow. The room seemed to shrink around me. A panic attack was coming, something I hadn't experienced since college finals. I forced myself to focus on my breathing, counting slowly as I inhaled and exhaled. When the worst had passed, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, eyes red and puffy, face pale. Enough, I whispered to my reflection. Enough being the family doormat. I had reached a crucial decision point. Continue being the peacekeeper who sacrificed her own needs for family harmony, or finally stand up for myself and what was rightfully mine. 29 years of conditioning urged me toward the former. But something stronger, something that sounded remarkably like Grandma's voice, pushed me toward the latter. I texted Lauren. I'm taking back my cabin. Her response was immediate. Finally. What's the plan? And for the first time in this whole ordeal, I smiled. By noon, I had checked out of the hotel and was sitting across from Patricia Reynolds, a local attorney specializing in property disputes. Her office overlooked the main street of Lake Placid, with diplomas and fishing trophies competing for wall space. Based on what you've told me, she said, reviewing the documents I'd brought, you have several options. We could send a formal cease and desist letter, file for restraining order against your sister specifically, or pursue damages for the items already destroyed. I considered these options carefully. What about changing the locks? Is that legal since I'm the sole owner? Absolutely. As the property owner, you have the right to secure your premises as you see fit. Anyone using a key they once had but are now told not to use would be trespassing. This felt like the right first step. After leaving Patricia's office with a folder of legal documents, I headed to Adirondack Hardware on Main Street. The bell jingled cheerfully as I entered, and an older man with a magnificent white beard looked up from behind the counter. Help you find something, miss? I need new locks for a cabin. All exterior doors, and maybe some window locks too. He nodded sagely. Security issue? You could say that. As he helped me select the appropriate hardware, the man, who introduced himself as Samuel Mitchell, shared that he also did handyman work in the area. He handed me his card. In case you need help with installation or any repairs. Been fixing up places around these lakes for 30 years. I tucked his card into my wallet, already thinking it might come in handy. With the new locks purchased and stowed in my car, I steeled myself for the return to the cabin. This time, I wouldn't be fleeing in tears. The driveway had even more cars than before. Music still pumped from inside, though it was barely 1 in the afternoon. I counted at least 5 new vehicles. This wasn't just a weekend gathering, it was turning into a full-blown house party. I parked at the end of the driveway and walked toward the cabin, determined to document everything before taking action. Using my phone, I photographed each car with its license plate, then systematically recorded the exterior damage, cigarette burns on the wooden railing, beer cans floating in Grandma's flower beds, a broken window on the garden shed. As I approached the front porch, 2 young women I'd never seen before exited the cabin. They wore bikini tops despite the autumn chill, with drinks in their hands. "Excuse me," I said. "Are you friends of Brooks?" They looked me up and down with identical expressions of vague disdain. "Who's asking?" the taller one said. "I'm Abigail Davis. I own this cabin." They exchanged glances. "Oh," the shorter one said. "You're the sister. Brooks said you might show up again to cause problems." My blood boiled, but I kept my voice steady. "And you are?"
I'm Madison.
"This is Caitlin. We work with Brooke at the real estate office." "Well, Madison and Caitlin, I'd like to know how many people are currently staying at my property without my permission." Madison shrugged. "Like 15 maybe? People have been coming and going." 15 people. In a 3-bedroom cabin. Using Grandma's water, electricity, and septic system that wasn't designed for that many occupants. "Thanks," I said tightly and continued documenting with my phone as I walked around the property. The dock was now crowded with people sunbathing and drinking. The small aluminum fishing boat that had belonged to my grandfather had been untied and was drifting about 20 feet from shore, empty beer cans visible even from a distance. I was photographing this when a voice called out, "Can I help you?" I turned to find an elderly woman watching me from the neighboring property line. She wore gardening gloves and held pruning shears, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Hello," I said, walking over to her. "I'm Abigail Davis. This was my grandmother Margaret's place." Recognition dawned on her face. Margaret's granddaughter.
I'm Eleanor Jenkins.
Your grandmother and I were friends for over 40 years.
I was so sorry to hear of her passing.
We shook hands across the low stone wall separating our properties. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Jenkins. I wish it were under better circumstances." She glanced toward the party on my dock. "Yes, well, it's been quite lively over there lately. Not at all like when Margaret was in residence." "Lately?" You mean this has happened before? Eleanor's expression grew concerned.
Oh my, yes.
Different groups every few weekends since early summer. I assumed you were renting it out, though I did think Margaret would have disapproved. My stomach dropped. Since early summer? I've only visited about once a month since I inherited it. Are you certain? Quite certain. I keep track of comings and goings. Force of habit from my days as a school principal. She smiled apologetically. The worst was over 4th of July weekend. The noise was incredible. Fireworks until 3 in the morning. My dog was terrified. I had no idea, I whispered. I never gave permission for any of this. Eleanor patted my hand. I suspected as much. You have Margaret's eyes, you know. Kind eyes. She wouldn't have raised a granddaughter who'd allow such disrespect to her property. After promising to update Eleanor once I'd sorted things out, I returned to my documentation mission with renewed determination. If this had been going on all summer, the damage was likely far worse than I initially thought. The inside of the cabin confirmed my fears. New stains marked the living room rug. The antique mirror in the hallway had a crack running through it. In the kitchen, the distinctive smell of burnt food suggested someone had misused Grandma's temperamental oven. But the worst discovery came when I entered Grandma's bedroom again. The small wooden jewelry box that had sat on her nightstand was gone. It wasn't particularly valuable in monetary terms, containing mostly costume pieces, but it included her wedding ring and a cameo brooch that had belonged to her mother. I searched frantically through drawers and closets, but it was nowhere to be found. Heartsick, I continued through the cabin, finding more evidence of disrespect and damage at every turn. In the small den, Grandma's collection of family photographs had been removed from the walls, stacked carelessly in a corner. Several frames were cracked, and one precious image of Grandma as a young woman standing beside her new cabin was missing entirely. I was about to confront the partiers outside when a notification popped up on my phone. Lauren had sent a link with the message. You need to see this right now. The link opened to an Airbnb listing titled, Charming Adirondack Family Cabin with Lake Access. The photos were unmistakably of my cabin, though carefully angled to hide the personal touches. The host was listed as Brooke D. The calendar showed multiple bookings throughout the summer, with rates ranging from $200 to $350 per night. A quick calculation suggested Brooke had made at least $3,400 renting out my property, without permission. I felt physically ill. This wasn't just Brooke using the cabin occasionally. She had turned it into a business venture, profiting from my inheritance while simultaneously allowing it to be damaged and disrespected. I called Lauren, who answered immediately. Tell me you're seeing this, she said without preamble. I'm seeing it. I'm standing in the middle of it. There are 15 people here right now, Lauren. 15. And my neighbor says it's been happening all summer. What are you going to do? I looked around at the remnants of my grandmother's careful curation, at the life she had built in this special place, now treated as disposable by the sister who should have respected both her memory and my ownership. I'm taking it back, I said, with a calm that surprised me. Today. After ending the call, I walked to the small bedroom that had once been mine during summer visits. It remained relatively untouched, probably because it was the furthest from the main living areas. I sat on the twin bed with its faded quilt and felt tears welling up again, but this time they came from a different place. Not hurt or shock, but resolute anger. On the bedside table stood a small framed photo of Grandma and me on this very bed, her arm around my 10-year-old shoulders, both of us laughing at some forgotten joke. I picked it up, tracing her face with my finger. I won't let them disrespect what you built, I whispered to her image. I promise. With renewed determination, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on Samuel Mitchell's business card. Adirondack Lock and Key, Sam speaking. Mr. Mitchell, this is Abigail Davis. We met at the hardware store earlier. How soon could you come change my locks? Got my truck right outside. Could be there in 45 minutes if it's urgent. It's urgent, I confirmed and gave him the address. Next, I called Attorney Reynolds and updated her on the Airbnb discovery. She recommended immediate action and promised to email me formal documents I could print and serve. One more thing, I added. Can you help me draft a clear, legally binding notice that this property is private and use without the owner's explicit permission constitutes trespassing? Absolutely. I'll include that with the documents. Just need a place to send them. I thought quickly. Send them to Eleanor Jenkins next door. I can print them there. My final call was to the Lake George Sheriff's Department, explaining the situation and asking what support they could provide if needed. The dispatcher was sympathetic but cautious. Without a formal eviction notice or restraining order, there's limited action we can take. But we can certainly have a deputy present to keep the peace while you secure your property, especially if you're concerned about confrontation. I accepted this offer, arranged a time, and then steeled myself for the next few hours. The confrontation was coming, and this time, I would be prepared. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, I had assembled my support team. Samuel Mitchell's truck was parked in the driveway, loaded with new locks and security hardware. Eleanor had printed Attorney Reynolds' documents and even made a pitcher of iced tea for fortification. A sheriff's deputy named Officer Garcia waited discreetly in his vehicle at the end of the driveway, there to intervene only if necessary. I took a deep breath and walked toward the dock where Brooke, Tyler, and their friends were still partying, oblivious to the impending reckoning. As I approached, Brooke spotted me and rolled her eyes dramatically. "She's back," she announced to the group. Everyone braced for the lecture. I kept my voice level. "Brooke, we need to talk. Privately. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of my friends. They already know you're trying to ruin our weekend.
Fine.
Everyone needs to pack their things and leave.
Now.
I've documented the damage to my property, discovered your unauthorized Airbnb business, and have legal notices ready to serve. A locksmith is changing the locks as we speak, and there's a sheriff's deputy here to ensure a peaceful transition." The group fell silent. Tyler stood up, beer in hand. "You brought cops? Are you insane?" "I brought a witness to make sure everyone leaves without further damaging my property. I also have this." I held up my phone showing the Airbnb listing. "Care to explain how you've been renting out my cabin all summer without permission?" Brooke's face flushed. "It was just sitting empty most of the time. Why shouldn't someone use it?" "Because it's not yours to rent. You've made thousands of dollars from my property while letting people damage family heirlooms and disrespect Grandma's memory." The party guests began to look uncomfortable, gathering their belongings and murmuring about leaving. Brooke noticed and became desperate. "Don't go. She can't just kick everyone out. My parents gave me permission to be here." "Your parents don't own this cabin," I said firmly.
Ida.
"And I need everyone who doesn't belong here to leave within the hour." Tyler stepped forward aggressively. "Or what? You'll have us arrested? For accepting your sister's invitation? Good luck with that." "Not for accepting an invitation," I clarified, "but possibly for trespassing after being formally notified that you're unwelcome, for damage to private property, and in Brooke's case, for running an illegal rental business using property she doesn't own." The tension was broken by the sound of cars coming up the driveway. My parents had arrived, looking grim and determined. Dad stormed toward us while Mom hurried to Brooke's side. "What is this nonsense?" Dad demanded. "The sheriff's department called us because our daughters are having some kind of standoff." "This isn't a family squabble," I said. "This is about legal property rights and Brooke's systematic abuse of my inheritance." Mom put her arm around Brooke, protectively. "Abigail, you're making a scene. These people came here in good faith." "Did they?" I pulled out my phone again. "Did they know they were staying at an illegal Airbnb? Did you know Brooke's been renting out my cabin all summer and pocketing the money?" My parents exchanged confused glances. This, apparently, was news to them. "That can't be right," Mom said uncertainly. "It is right. I have the listing, the reviews, the calendar of bookings. She's made over $3,000 renting out property that isn't hers to rent." Brooke burst into tears, the kind of dramatic sobs that had always brought my parents running to her defense. "I just wanted to share this beautiful place with people. You're so selfish, keeping it all to yourself when you're hardly ever here."
Tyler chimed in.
Yeah, and if we're being honest, your grandmother would probably be happy to see the place being used instead of treated like some shrine. That pushed me over the edge. Don't you dare presume to know what my grandmother would want. This was her home for 60 years. She left it to me because she knew I would respect what she built here. And in less than a year, you've treated it like a party house. My father, always the one to seek quick resolution to family conflict, tried to take control. All right, everyone calm down. Clearly, there's been a misunderstanding. How about this? Brooke's friends leave today, and then the four of us, as a family, sit down and work out a fair arrangement for sharing the cabin. There's no misunderstanding, I said. And there will be no sharing arrangement until Brooke takes responsibility for the damage she's caused and returns every cent she made renting out my property. Mom looked shocked. Abigail, we raised you to share with your sister. You raised me to be taken advantage of. Not anymore. Brooke's tears stopped abruptly, replaced by cold anger. You've always been jealous of me. Always. You're loving this power trip, aren't you? This isn't about power or jealousy. It's about respect. Respect for my property rights, respect for Grandma's memory, and respect for me as a person who deserves to have boundaries. Samuel Mitchell chose this moment to approach, tipping his cap politely. Ms. Davis? Locks are all changed. Got the new keys right here for you. Thank you, Sam, I said, accepting the keys. Could you start on the window locks next? You changed the locks? Mom gasped. Without discussing it with the family first, I don't need family discussion or permission to secure my own property. Dad's face darkened with anger. This is not how we handle things in this family, Abigail. Your grandmother would be ashamed of how you're treating your sister. That's where you're wrong, Dad. Grandma knew exactly what she was doing when she left the cabin to me and not to the family collectively. She valued this place too much to see it treated the way Brooke has treated it. Tyler, sensing the tide turning against them, decided on a new tactic. Look, maybe we got carried away, but threatening legal action against your own sister? That's cold. What's cold is renting out someone else's property without permission. What's cold is allowing people to damage family heirlooms and then playing the victim when called out on it. I handed Brooke the formal notice Attorney Reynolds had prepared. This documents that you no longer have permission to use this property without my explicit written consent. It also demands repayment of all rental income you received, plus damages for items destroyed or missing, including Grandma's jewelry box. Jewelry box? Mom interrupted. What jewelry box? The one that was on Grandma's nightstand. The one with her wedding ring. It's gone, along with several other irreplaceable items. Brooke looked genuinely surprised. I don't know anything about a jewelry box. Whether you took it or one of your paying guests took it, the responsibility is yours. My father, a man unaccustomed to not getting his way, tried one last manipulation. If this is how you treat family, Abigail, your mother, and I may need to rethink our own estate planning. Is that what you want? For a moment, the old fear gripped me. The fear of disappointing, of being excluded, of not being the good daughter. But it passed quickly. This isn't about your money, Dad. This is about respect. If you can't see that, then that's your problem, not mine. An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Then, unexpectedly, one of Brooke's friends spoke up. Guys, we should go. This is getting weird, and honestly, if someone was renting out my place without permission, I'd be pissed too. This seemed to break the spell. The party guests began collecting their belongings in earnest. Tyler tried to argue further, but even he could see it was a losing battle. This isn't over, he muttered as he stalked past me toward his car. Within 30 minutes, all of Brooke's friends had left, leaving just my immediate family and Samuel, who tactfully busied himself with the window locks while we continued our confrontation inside. Brooke sat at the kitchen table, still teary but with an undercurrent of calculation in her expression. You've humiliated me in front of my friends. I hope you're happy. I'm not happy at all, I said truthfully. I'm heartbroken that it came to this. But I'm not backing down. Mom tried once more. Surely we can come to some compromise. The cabin is so big for just one person. Maybe Brooke could have scheduled weekends or… Mom, I interrupted firmly. There will be no compromise until Brooke acknowledges what she did wrong and makes amends. She rented out my property for profit. She allowed it to be damaged. Items are missing. These aren't small transgressions. My father, unusually quiet now, finally spoke. Brooke, did you really list the cabin on Airbnb? Cornered, Brooke admitted it. Just a few weekends when I knew Abby wouldn't be here. It's not like I'm made of money, Dad. My commission checks have been terrible lately. That doesn't make it okay to steal from your sister, he said, surprising me with this small concession. I wasn't stealing. I was just borrowing the cabin. You can't borrow something and charge other people money for using it, I pointed out. That's literally theft. The conversation continued in circles for another hour, with Brooke alternating between tearful apologies and defensive accusations, my parents trying to broker peace without holding Brooke truly accountable, and me standing firm on my boundaries. By the end, we reached an uneasy resolution. Brooke would remove the Airbnb listing immediately, pay back the rental income, and replace or compensate for damaged items. My parents agreed, reluctantly, that the cabin was legally mine to control. As they prepared to leave, my mother pulled me aside. I hope you know what you're doing, Abigail. Family relationships are more important than property. I do know what I'm doing, Mom. I'm finally standing up for myself. And you're right about one thing. Family relationships are important. That's why they should be based on mutual respect, not one person constantly giving in to keep the peace. After they drove away, with promises of talking more later and veiled warnings about consequences, I stood on the porch watching the dust settle on the driveway. Samuel finished installing the last window lock and joined me. Family's complicated, he offered sympathetically. That it is, I agreed. Lock systems all set. New keys are coded and can't be duplicated without your written permission. I also installed those motion sensor lights you wanted and set up the doorbell camera. Anyone comes around, you'll know about it. I handed him a check, adding a generous tip. Thank you, Sam. Not just for the locks, but for being here during all that. He tipped his cap again. Sometimes standing your ground is the hardest thing to do. But from what I saw today, your grandmother would be mighty proud. As Samuel's truck disappeared down the driveway, I turned back to face the cabin. It was a mess. It would take days to clean and repair everything. Some things, like Grandma's jewelry box, might never be recovered. But for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt something close to peace. The cabin was mine again, and I was finally standing up for myself, even if it cost me the easy approval of my family. The morning after the confrontation dawned clear and crisp, with mist rising off the lake in ethereal wisps. I stood on the dock with a cup of coffee, watching a pair of loons glide across the water. The previous day's drama felt both immediate and somehow distant, like the final scene of a play I'd been unwillingly cast in. I had decided to stay at the cabin for 2 weeks. My boss had been surprisingly understanding when I explained I needed time to deal with serious property damage and family issues, granting me remote work privileges and 10 days of accumulated vacation time. Now I had the space and solitude to begin the process of reclaiming what was mine. The first 3 days were dedicated to cleaning. I worked methodically from room to room, cataloging damage, discarding broken items beyond repair, and carefully restoring what could be saved. Grandma's tablecloth soaked in a special solution Eleanor had provided, pulling most of the wine stains out of the delicate lace. The hardwood floors were scrubbed and polished to remove scuff marks and beer stains. The rust-damaged cast iron skillet required hours of patient reseasoning. On the 4th day, Samuel Mitchell returned with supplies to repair the cigarette burns on the porch railing and fix the broken window in the garden shed. As we worked together, he shared stories of Lake George from decades past, including several fond memories of my grandmother. Margaret was quite something, he said, carefully sanding the damaged wood. Fiercely independent. Reminded me a bit of you, actually. I smiled at the comparison. I wish I had half her backbone. She never seemed to care what anyone thought of her. That came with time, Sam assured me. She wasn't always that way. Life has a way of teaching you what matters and what doesn't. Our working relationship evolved into a friendship as the repairs continued. Sam knew every inch of the lake, every hiking trail, every seasonal change. His quiet competence was comforting, and I found myself looking forward to his daily arrivals. Eleanor Jenkins became another regular visitor, bringing homemade muffins and practical advice in equal measure. She helped me reorganize the kitchen, explaining the logic behind Grandma's particular arrangement of dishes and cookware. She believed everything had a proper place, Eleanor explained, said it brought order to a chaotic world. I could use some of that order right about now, I admitted. My daily calls with Lauren became a lifeline to the outside world. She cheered every small victory, from successfully rehanging the family photographs to standing firm against my mother's increasingly guilt-laden text messages. Have you heard from Brooke? She asked during our call at the end of the first week. Just through my parents. Apparently, she's too upset to speak to me directly. Dad says she's working on getting the money together to repay me for the Airbnb profits. And you believe that? I sighed. Not really. But I'm giving her the chance to do the right thing before I take more formal action. The cabin slowly transformed back into the sanctuary I remembered, though with subtle changes that made it more mine than Grandma's. I moved the writing desk to capture the morning light better. I added bookshelves in the guest bedroom. I planted new wildflowers along the path to the dock. During the second week, while organizing the crowded bookshelves in the living room, I discovered something unexpected. Behind a row of Reader's Digest condensed books that nobody ever read was a collection of leather-bound journals. My grandmother's diaries, dating back to 1953, the year she married my grandfather. That evening, wrapped in one of her quilts on the porch swing, I began reading them chronologically. Her elegant handwriting filled page after page with observations about nature, recipes she was perfecting, and reflections on family life. In the entry dated June 17, 1968, I found something that made me catch my breath. Robert's sister Violet visited today with her children. While the little ones played by the lake, Vi confided that she feels Robert and I favor her eldest niece over the others. It struck me as unfair, as we try to love all the children equally. But then I wondered, do we unconsciously show preference? Do I give more attention to little Susan because she reminds me of myself at that age? Vi left angry when I suggested she might be seeing favoritism where none exists. Family is the most complicated love of all. I read the entry twice, struck by the parallels to my own situation. Grandma had faced similar family conflicts, though from the other side of the equation. I continued reading, finding more entries that revealed the complexities of her family relationships, including difficult periods of estrangement from her own sister over perceived slights and misunderstandings. In an entry from 1991, she wrote, "Today I stood my ground with Caroline, her sister, about the holiday plans. For years I've adjusted my schedule to accommodate her preferences, always bending to keep the peace. No more. It wasn't easy, and there were tears on both sides, but afterward I felt a curious lightness. Perhaps boundaries aren't walls that separate us from loved ones, but necessary lines that allow us to love them without losing ourselves." I closed the journal, feeling a profound connection to the grandmother I'd loved but perhaps never fully known. She had faced the same struggles I was facing now, had felt the same guilt and uncertainty, and had ultimately chosen self-respect over appeasement. Midway through the second week, I received a formal letter from my parents. The envelope contained a check from Brooke for $3,200, less than she'd actually earned from the rentals, but close enough, and a typed note from my father. "Abigail, we hope this resolves the financial aspect of the unfortunate situation at the cabin. Brooke has expressed sincere regret for her actions and asks for your understanding during this difficult time in her life. Your mother and I suggest the following arrangement going forward. 1. The cabin remains in your name as per your grandmother's wishes. 2. Brooke may use the cabin for up to 2 weekends per month, with at least 1 week's notice. 3. Family gatherings take precedence over individual plans. 4. Any changes to the cabin's historic character must be approved by the family collectively. We trust this reasonable compromise will restore harmony to our family. Love, Dad. I read the letter twice, noting what it didn't contain. An apology from Brooke herself, any acknowledgement of the emotional damage done, or recognition of my right to set my own boundaries for my property. With Samuel's help, I drafted a response outlining my own terms.
1.
The cabin remains in my name with full decision-making authority. 2. Family members may request to use the cabin with at least 2 weeks' notice, subject to my approval. 3. All visitors must follow cabin rules regarding care of property and heirlooms. 4. Any violation of these terms will result in loss of visiting privileges. I concluded with, I value our family relationship and want the cabin to be a place of happy memories for all of us. But that can only happen with mutual respect for boundaries and property. As I sealed the envelope, I felt not anger but resolve. This wasn't about punishing Brooke or my parents. It was about establishing a new, healthier dynamic. During my final days at the cabin, I discovered another of Grandma's special places. Behind the garden shed, almost hidden by overgrown rhododendrons, was a small garden enclosed by a low stone wall. Inside, perennial flowers had gone wild in her absence. Black-eyed Susans, coneflowers, and lady's mantle creating a riot of color even in early fall. I spent my last afternoon clearing weeds and pruning back the overgrowth, imagining Grandma doing the same task for decades. As I worked, I noticed a stone bench nearly hidden by tall grasses. Once cleared, I found an inscription carved into its surface. In solitude we find ourselves, in sharing we find our humanity. That evening, as I sat on that bench watching the sunset turn the lake to fire, my phone buzzed with a text. From Brooke, the first direct communication since the confrontation. I found the jewelry box. It was in Tyler's car. He says someone must have packed it by mistake. I can mail it or bring it by.
I'm sorry, Abby.
For everything. The message wasn't elaborate or particularly eloquent, but it felt like the first genuine communication we'd had in years. I replied simply, "Thank you for finding it. I appreciate the apology. Let's talk when I'm back in town." It wasn't complete reconciliation, but it was a start. A seed of potential change, planted in newly cleared ground. 6 months passed, bringing winter's deep freeze and eventual thaw to the Adirondacks. The cabin, buttoned up against the snow and cold, waited patiently for spring's return. And so did I, giving myself and my family the space to process what had happened and what might come next. The transformation of the cabin continued during weekend visits throughout the winter. Samuel, who turned out to be as skilled with interior work as exterior, helped me refinish the original hardwood floors and update the ancient heating system. Our professional relationship gradually evolved into something more personal, our conversations extending long after the work was done for the day. Eleanor became a regular correspondence friend, sending weekly letters filled with local gossip and sage advice. She kept an eye on the cabin during the weeks I couldn't be there, reporting on everything from heavy snowfall on the roof to deer tracks on the frozen lake. My relationship with my family entered a new phase as well. The initial anger and hurt feelings slowly gave way to cautious communication. My parents, though still uncomfortable with my assertiveness, began to show a grudging respect for the boundaries I'd established. Our Sunday dinners resumed, with noticeably less manipulation and more genuine conversation. Brooke proved the biggest surprise. The return of Grandma's jewelry box seemed to mark a turning point for her. Without the enabling presence of our parents, she and I met for coffee several times, having the kind of honest conversations we'd avoided for years. "I was jealous," she admitted during one such meeting. "You and Grandma had this special bond that I never had with anyone. When she left you the cabin, it felt like one final confirmation that she loved you more." "She didn't love me more," I said. "She just recognized that I would value the cabin the way she did." "You've always been more interested in new experiences, new places." The cabin represented stability and tradition. "Maybe," Brooke conceded, "but I still shouldn't have done what I did." Tyler kept saying it was no big deal, that family property is basically communal property. I knew better, but it was easier to go along with it. "And the Airbnb?" I asked. She had the grace to look genuinely ashamed. That was all me. I was having money problems after the commission structure changed at work. It seemed like an easy solution to a temporary problem. I never thought about how it would affect you or the cabin. Over time, Brooke began to earn back my trust through actions rather than promises. She helped with several restoration projects at the cabin, carefully following my lead. She stopped bringing Tyler around and eventually mentioned they had broken up. He didn't understand why I was still obsessing about the cabin situation, she explained. Said I should just demand my share and be done with it. That's when I realized he'd never respected my family or our history. By early spring, I felt ready to host a small gathering at the newly restored cabin. Lauren drove up from New York City for the weekend. Eleanor brought her famous blueberry cobbler. Samuel arrived early to help prepare the dock for the season. And yes, my parents and Brooke came too, each bringing a dish and, more importantly, an open mind. Before dinner, I presented everyone with a formal document my lawyer had prepared, cabin use agreement. It outlined clear terms for family visits, maintenance responsibilities, and respect for the property's historical elements. Everyone signed it without argument, a small miracle that didn't go unnoticed. As we ate dinner on the porch, watching the sunset paint the lake in gold and crimson, the conversation flowed more easily than it had in years. Mom shared stories of visiting the cabin as a newlywed, describing how intimidated she'd been by Grandma's exacting standards. Dad recalled fishing trips with Grandpa, learning to clean bass and perch right on the dock below us. I never knew Grandma was scared of swimming, Brooke said after one such story. She always seemed fearless to me. Oh, Margaret had her fears, Eleanor chimed in. She just didn't let them stop her from living exactly as she pleased. After dinner, while the others chatted around the fire pit Samuel had built near the shore, I slipped inside to fetch more coffee. In the kitchen, I noticed the family Bible sitting on the counter, though I couldn't remember putting it there. Something compelled me to open it. Between the pages of Psalms, I found an envelope addressed simply, "For Abigail, when she needs it most." Inside was a letter written in Grandma's unmistakable hand, dated just 2 months before she passed away. "My dearest Abby," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've inherited the cabin as I intended. I hope it brings you the same joy and peace it brought me over the years. I'm leaving the cabin specifically to you because I see in you the strength to preserve what matters while having the wisdom to know when change is necessary. Family will question this decision. They may even try to undermine it. Stand firm. In my 87 years, I've learned that family love is both the most precious gift and the most complicated burden. We endure hurts from family we would never accept from strangers, all in the name of keeping peace. But sometimes the most loving thing we can do is establish firm boundaries. The cabin is more than logs and nails. It's a testament to choosing what matters: simplicity, nature, connection to something lasting. In your hands, I know it will continue to be a place of gathering, of memory-making, and perhaps most importantly, of finding yourself away from the noise of modern life. Remember always, the most important inheritance I can leave you isn't this cabin, but the courage to stand up for yourself, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. With all my love, Grandma Margaret. I read the letter twice, tears blurring the words the second time through. Somehow, she had known exactly what challenges I would face. She had prepared me, not just with her legal will, but with her emotional wisdom. When I rejoined the group outside, the conversation had turned to summer plans. Brooke was describing a kayaking trip she wanted to organize. "Of course, only if that works for you, Abby," she added, catching my eye. "It's your cabin." "Our family's cabin," I corrected gently. "Under my management." Samuel caught my hand as I sat beside him. "Everything okay?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just the opposite," I said. I found confirmation I'm on the right path. As the fire crackled and sparks rose to meet the emerging stars, I felt a profound sense of rightness. The journey hadn't been easy. Relationships had been strained, painful truths exposed, old patterns broken. But from that difficult process had emerged something authentic and strong. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I took Grandma's letter to the dock. The lake stretched black and silver in the moonlight, the same view she had contemplated for 60 years. I could almost feel her presence beside me, nodding approval at the boundaries I'd established and the peace I'd found in doing so. The most important inheritance wasn't the cabin, though I cherished it. It was the courage to stand up for myself, to define my own worth rather than accepting others' limitations. In protecting the physical legacy she'd left me, I discovered the greater legacy of self-respect that had always been within me, waiting to be claimed. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family for something that was rightfully yours? Or have you struggled with setting boundaries with loved ones? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics and personal growth. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is establish clear boundaries. I wish you strength and clarity in your own family relationships.